Sweet promises given to all who believe.
Welcome to Bible Talk class. Today we have a special segment for you and it's entitled, Does God Deceive Prophets? According to Ezekiel chapter 14 verse 19. Please subscribe if you are yet to be a member of Bible Talk class, and share this video and many videos that we have prepared on the Bible, addressing difficulties that are found within the Bible. We also would like to ask you to like this video and other videos, and that will give us a positive feedback that indeed you love what we are doing and that we should continue to do more. Share this message with the world and be a blessing and be blessed. Let's begin. The issue you are dealing with here comes from the Bible, Ezekiel chapter 14 verse 9. The King James Version reads, "And if the prophet be deceived, when he hath spoken a thing, I, the Lord, have deceived that prophet, and I will stretch out my hand upon him, and will destroy him from the midst of my people Israel." Now, the New King James Version also reads, "And if the prophet is induced to speak anything, I, the Lord, have induced that prophet, and I will stretch out my hand against him and destroy him from among my people Israel." So, the issue is very simple. The words deceived and induced are translated from the Hebrew petah. Petah can be translated as entice, deceive, or induce, with the same semantic value of persuasion. Other English versions have the word entice. Others also have persuasion. In short, all these words amount to the same semantic value of persuasion. Does God persuade, deceive, induce, entice prophets as stated in this passage? This is the query that we seek to address in this presentation. Let's understand the situation of Ezekiel chapter 14 verse 9. God used Ezekiel as a spokesperson, that is a prophet, when Judah was in exile in Babylon. Ezekiel chapter 1 verses 1 to 3. God made Ezekiel the watchman on a tower. Ezekiel chapters 3 and 33. God warned prophet through Ezekiel not to give any false hope to the people while in idolatry. Ezekiel chapters 13 to 14. God emphasized the point that he would hold prophets and the people responsible for the wrong choices they make. Ezekiel chapters 18 and 33. Ezekiel chapter 14, where our verse is found, falls within the judgment speech test type. In interpreting prophetic texts in the Old Testament, it is important to know the text type that the prophecy belongs to. We have several text types. We have lamentation, we have judgment speech, we have salvation speech, and this particular speech we have here is judgment speech text type, because God here gives judgment or presents judgment against the prophets and the evil inquirer. Ezekiel chapter 13 lays the responsibility of false prophecy at the doors of human prophets. To understand Ezekiel chapter 14, we must appreciate chapter 13, because that's where the discussion begins. The discussion about prophets giving false prophecy. And in chapter 13, God makes it clear that false prophecy originates from human prophets. Human prophets are responsible, solely responsible for false prophecy. And so we read from verse 3 of chapter 13. "This is what the sovereign Lord says. Woe to the foolish prophets who follow their own spirit and have seen nothing. verses 6 to 7. Read. Their visions are false, and their divinations a lie. Even though the Lord has not sent them, they say, the Lord declares, and expect him to fulfill their words. Have you not seen false visions and uttered lying divinations when you say, the Lord declares, though I have not spoken? It's very clear from these readings that human prophets are responsible for false prophecies or false utterances. Chapter 14 begins with God's call to Israel to turn away from their adulterous acts as they seek his face from his prophet Ezekiel. Verses 1 to 6 present a situation that some men came to Ezekiel to seek the face of God, and God told Ezekiel that he, God, was going to deal with the people himself because their hearts were not right and they needed to hear the truth. And this is the context. And that God declares in verses 7 to 8 that any person, be it an Israelite or a non-Israelite, who comes to a prophet and inquires about him, God, with idolatrous heart, he, God, will deal with the person himself. And so this is the context that we find our verse. That is verse 9. So the verse 9 flows from the discussion we have in verses 1 to 8. And here we're talking about people coming to seek the face of God through a prophet. The prophet must allow God to tell set people what they need to hear. Now verse 9 continues verses 7 and 8 with a conditional statement of what a prophet may decide to do with respect to the situation of the inquirer. So verse 9 is put in a conditional statement that if a prophet is deceived, if a prophet is persuaded, if a prophet is induced, if a prophet is enticed, by whom? It's a passive statement, passive. The prophet is induced by, there should be someone who will cause the inducement or enticement or persuasion of the prophet. So that conditional statement comes before the statement that God says, I have induced or enticed or persuaded or deceived the prophet. So the first statement in the conditional clause suggests that someone has induced the prophet, has enticed the prophet to make a statement. And that is what we are looking at now. It's important to understand the structure of the statement we find in verse 9. So the point is, if the prophet is persuaded by the inquirer to say what the Lord has not said, because he may want to please the inquirer, the prophecy given to this inquirer by this prophet because of this persuasion should be deemed as not coming from God, and that the prophet would have been left to his own imaginations and feelings. The moment the prophet is enticed by the inquirer to say sweet words to the inquirer, okay, then the prophet will be left alone to his own imaginations and feelings and say whatever that he feels right to say. And when that happens, God says that I will punish both. Verse 10, he says that I'll punish the prophets and the inquirer. Now let's get a background here to understand this whole discussion. 1 Kings chapter 22 verses 18 to 23 present an additional clue for understanding Ezekiel chapter 14 verse 9. In 1 Kings chapter 22 verses 18 to 23, God's verdict to end the reign of King Ahab after several admonitions is demonstrated with a heavenly vision portraying fatal end when heeding deceptive words of prophets. In this passage, we find King Jehoshaphat, the king of the south, that is Judah, visiting King Ahab. And King Ahab told this king from the south that I'm going to fight my enemies. And I hope you can join me and fight my enemies. And King Jehoshaphat asked, have you consulted God? I said, well, yes, of course. All the prophets have confirmed that I'll win this battle. And King Jehoshaphat asked again, have you consulted all the prophets? Have you consulted all the prophets? He said, well, there's one prophet who doesn't say good things about me. And so, well, I've not asked. And so the king advised, okay, then let's ask and see. So they sent someone to bring this prophet called Micaiah. And when the one that was sent to call Micaiah went, he told Micaiah that when you go, say what the king has to hear. And that is, tell him that he's going to win. And so Micaiah came and told the king that, yes, you are going to win. And the king said, no, you are lying, because I know you, that you always tell the truth. You tell what God has said. And Micaiah said that, well, I saw a heavenly vision. And in that vision, I saw that God was looking for someone to come and send you a message. And so there was one spirit that came. That spirit was a lying spirit. That spirit has come upon your false prophets just to tell you what you want to hear. And the whole point is that what they are telling you will lead you to destruction. And so that's what God has planned for you, that your end will be destruction. And so this is the picture we find in 1 Kings. And the same situation is repeated in Ezekiel chapter 14. After God has persistently revealed his truth to his people, and the people persistently refuse, the Lord dramatically allows his people to their own imaginations and their wishes, which ultimately will lead them to destruction. Their disobedience to the truth will not be enough to bring them to destruction, but also the false hope peddled by the false prophets. So what God has persistently warned them against will not be enough to bring them to destruction. And so God will now let false prophets to continue to give them false hope so that they will be destroyed or be punished for not obeying his words. And that is the point that we are stressing here. Now, the purpose of the deception encouraged by God was to bring judgment upon his people. If you look at Ezekiel chapter 14, verses 9 and 10, you see that when God says that I have deceived the prophets, the next thing that follows is judgment will come upon the prophets and the inquirer, or my people. It's a divine language that signifies impending judgment. The result of this judgment is expressed in Ezekiel chapter 14, verse 11, that Israel will learn to trust God and be reunited with him. So if God deceives a prophet and let the people also be deceived by the prophets, and the people are sent into exile or punished so that they will be reconciled or be reunited with God, it doesn't make sense. So God does not set out to deceive people so that the people will be punished, so that people will be reunited with him. That is not the point. The point is that when God says that I'm deceiving prophets or I'm sending lying spirits to prophets, what God is saying is that I want to punish them because I have said all that I need to say. They are not ready to listen to the truth, and therefore I need to punish them. Israel was under God's protection. Therefore, any persistent disobedience that will cause God's withdrawal of his protection will be deemed as divinely induced act of destruction. It is very interesting to note that ancient Israel thought of God as the origin of good and evil. Any calamity that befell them, they considered the calamity to have come from God. In fact, when you read Isaiah chapter 45 verse 7, Amos chapter 3 verse 9 in particular, God even says that I know that I'm responsible for all your problems. It means that you are never responsible. I am responsible and I take it. But remember that you caused that. Because of disobedience, I have to pave the way for you to be taken into exile. God did not show the false prophets in Ezekiel his visions, nor give them any word. Rather, he allowed the false prophets to their own imaginations. Ezekiel chapter 13 verse 2, God says that whatever the false prophets say, anything they say, comes from their own imaginations. I am not responsible for that vision or that word. And so God cannot be held responsible for deceiving them, for giving wrong imaginations. What is happening here is that God leaves them to their own imaginations. And that's why God holds the prophets and the inquirer responsible. He holds the two responsible because they have agreed to champion wrong cause. God will not counter the false prophecy because both the inquirer and the prophets have agreed not to hear the Lord's words. The Lord's words. In conclusion, the import of God causing the false prophet to give false prophecy is a biblical language of demonstrating divine declaration of judgment against the persistent disobedience. Now, let's read 1 Kings chapter 22 verse 23 to appreciate here. So, now, the Lord has put a deceiving spirit in the mouths of all these prophets of yours. The Lord has decreed disaster for you. So this is what Prophet Micaiah told King Ahab, that because you have refused, even the one who was sent to call me told me to repeat the false prophecy of these prophets of yours, not God's, your prophets. It means that you want to embrace false prophecy. You are not ready to embrace the truth from God. Therefore, the Lord has decreed disaster for you. So, the act of God deceiving the false prophets is synonymous to neglect that leads to destruction. And this is what you want to say about this passage. And that the language is a biblical language only to show that God has had enough of the disobedient and therefore has led them to their own imaginations, which would definitely lead them to destruction. I hope you have appreciated this presentation and you have understood the passage. Thank you very much for joining us. And in our next presentation, we are going to look at a very interesting topic. That is it biblical to say the Lord gives and the Lord takes away? Job chapter 1, verse 21. See you next time.
Behold, I come quickly, mine own to receive. Hold fast till I come, the danger is great. Sleep not as do others, be watchful